Hello and welcome to the LFC transfer room. My name's Tino. I am delighted tonight to be joined by two beautiful guests in Jay and Drew. Obviously, there is some news that we do have to cover. It's recently been announced that Queen Elizabeth II has unfortunately passed away. Everybody's thoughts that LFC transfer room are, of course, with the royal family at this moment in time. That being said, there is plenty of Liverpool Football Club news to get through, especially on the after what has been an absolutely atrocious performance last night against Napoli. We have got a lot to cover, but we'll jump right into it. I'll start with you, Drew. Drew, it was an atrocious performance. That is pretty much sums up the entire game. What was your immediate reaction to that game? And is that something that you foresaw? Is that something that a result like that? Did you see that coming?
Not in that way. Like before the game, I was actually like, we should probably do a job. It'll probably be a tough game. If I gave it more thought, I would have seen that we haven't beaten Napoli at all in any away fixture. So getting high expectations for the game, especially with the condition of our midfield, and the fact that pretty much like Nunez, regardless, it's like we've hardly had an established team this season. So any sort of rhythm is out the window. But I wasn't expecting it to be that bad. The best positive I can take from it is it's the first game out of 6. We just need to advance to the next round. If we're going to have a crisis moment, that we really need to look at ourselves and kind of regroup, regather, and completely change task. I'd rather it happen in that kind of game rather than another Premier League game where each loss counts more so than one loss in the Champions League group stages.
Yes, yeah, it's a very tough performance, a difficult game for the side, and a very frustrating night, really. The result, it wasn't the greatest, was it, Jay? Did you expect this? Drew, evidently not necessarily, but did you expect a result of that nature? Did you expect a tough game going into it?
To the shite, not like that, no. It weren't even the scoreline, mate. It was the manner of the defeat. We were just completely outclassed the whole game, and the crazy thing to think is, Osimhen came off. He was causing us all sorts of problems when he was on. Imagine he stayed on. That could have been 5, 6, 7-0. I thought he was outstanding up until he went off. His runs were causing us all sorts of problems. But no, mate, Napoli are a good side, but we shouldn't be completely schooled by them. We shouldn't be completely schooled by anyone. And yesterday we were. It was like men against boys yesterday.
Yeah, it certainly was men against boys. It was an atrocious performance all around us. We will be talking about a couple of the players in that game who really did let us down. It wasn't really like Napoli were amazing. They weren't the greatest. It wasn't the greatest Napoli performance. They didn't have to hit top gear, but they still outclassed us. And then, as you say, it's the manner of the defeat that is the hardest to take rather than the defeat itself. Drew, it's fair to say we haven't had the greatest start to the season in the slightest. It's now another game where, looking ahead to the Wolves game of the weekend, we're having to talk about, we need a reaction to the previous bad result. We did it after the Fulham game, we did it after the Crystal Palace game, we did it after the loss to United. Is it getting boring at this stage now? that every single week it seems to be, we need a reaction, we need a positive performance after a disappointing result. Are you fed up at this point of having to say that? Are you fed up by that? Those comments now?
I wouldn't say fed up, but yeah, I'm definitely disappointed with that being the kind of mentality. It almost reminds me of United Twitter's accounts saying like, "We go again," like after every defeat. It's kind of like, and you see some players after the game, like Robertson, like being honest, like even Klopp was honest, like there needs to be a massive reset. But one thing I never thought I'd see would be just the lackluster performances and just the lack of a better word, like just no heart on the field from a number of players game after game. I think maybe I think United should have been the biggest wake-up call. I think you only need one game to get a wake-up call, but the fact that we let it go, Palace, Fulham, United, that should have been the last reminder we needed that we can't go into a match just expecting to win, going in cruising through the game or expecting to show up in second gear and have the time to dictate and ratchet up if needed. But just it's way beyond, it's frustrating that we're at this stage. Don't know what else to say except I expect more from our players at the very least. It's just heads down. I don't know what to say, and as a fan, I don't even.
Yeah. It's frustrating. It's gutting when you see the performance, when the way we lost the game, and the way we've started the season has been awful, not great at all. Now we have a few. I see a few names that I recognise. Jen, hello again. Thank you for joining us. Ash, again, thank you for joining us. Whilst you are here, make sure you drop a like on the stream. Make sure you subscribe, of course, so you don't miss any of our content. We've got plenty of content coming up for you every single day, especially looking forward to hopefully a better result at the weekend in the Wolves game. We've got plenty of content coming up, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. It is a very difficult thing to take. We are evidently being outrun and outsprinted in that game against Napoli, but it's been part of this season going forward so far. Every single game, barring the Bournemouth game, which, I mean, Bournemouth are trash, so I'm not really counting it. Every single game, we've been at large parts of the game outperformed, outsprinted, out battled. Jay, is that a concern? That has to be a concern going forward. And how do you see Liverpool combating that? Do we need to change our formation? It's been talked about a lot with the high line and the lack of pressure, which puts us that high line at a big risk. Do we need to try and switch something up? You're muted.
Muted, Jay.
Did he? It's one of them, mate. You can play whatever formation, whatever tactic you want. If you won't put the yards in and you won't run, you're not going to win games. And that's been, I mean, it's crazy to say it because ever since Klopp's been here, we've been known as the team that does more running than anyone. But this is the thing about the Napoli game, like no one's even putting a shift in. So I don't think it matters if you change tactics or if you change the formation. It's about the personnel giving everything they've got, and they're not right now. It's not like they're not capable. This team hasn't gone crap overnight. You don't challenge for the quadruple and all of a sudden ends up a terrible team just because Mane's gone. I'm sick of people saying, "Oh, it's because Mane's gone." It's got nothing to do with Mane. Mane went a centre half for defending terribly. So it's about work rate, mate. And if that means taking certain players out the team, who aren't performing just because of the name and putting youngsters in, then that's what you do. You put people in who'll put a shift in. And right now, the only person I can see putting a proper shift in is Luis Diaz, Harvey Elliott, and Alisson, but he's a goalkeeper. So other than that, mate, like any of them could be dropped. Any of them. They've all been really, really poor, Van Dijk included. And I only say Van Dijk because of how much everyone loves him. He's been as bad as any player this season.
Yeah, he certainly has. There's a heck of a lot of players in that team who haven't performed to the level we expect them to perform. Trent has looked tired. Joe Gomez got skinned 2 or 3 times in that game against Napoli, albeit he did play okay in the couple of games prior. Drew, is there a player that really stood out from that game that you think probably deserves the rest, whether it be an atrocious performance or the way their season's gone so far? Is there a particular player you look at and think, yeah, they probably need a game or two on the bench just to freshen things up?
I honestly don't know, because I think if we had a fully fit team, that'd be different. But I think we played Milner just to the fact that, realistically, he was the only one with experienced legs on the side who was fit enough to start. Maybe start Arthur, Thiago, but you can't risk injuring. So my one player that I'd think of was, honestly, I would drop Van Dijk at this moment. But I'd only drop him if we had a fully fit Konate. Like, I would put Konate and Matip in at that point just to give Van Dijk a break. I don't know. It's baffling for me because it just heads dropped, like the fatigue in the squad. I don't think you can say they're like, maybe you could argue they're run into the ground, but we've seen them come back. We've seen them bounce back. It just seems mental. You look at Luis Diaz, it's like, yeah, he hasn't been in the Klopp system, but you don't need, it's just desire to go in. When he loses the ball, he scraps back. When we lose the ball or make mistakes, or other players, their heads just drop. They've lost that intensity. They've lost that fire, and it's not physical, it's mental, which is the most disappointing part, because that's something that Klopp needs to address, and it can be tough when it's that long with the team, that long in battles. It's like, how can you reinvigorate the troops, kind of thing. But I'd honestly, without a full squad, without enough new faces, you don't have worrying about your job. It's like Trent's going to start every game until Ramsey comes and challenges him. But you have enough players who are just not under the cosh for losing their starting position. And that's where I wish like Konate was up to speed, because him threatening over Virgil's shoulder would get a reaction. But that's honestly the only player I'd drop at the moment. I think midfield speaks for itself. If Thiago's fit, he'll start. It's not like we're starting Milner because he's preferred first choice. So out of the whole lineup, I'd say drop Van Dijk. Salah hasn't performed to expectations, but it's hard to put it on him when our midfield has been non-existent.
Yeah, the midfield is a key issue. A number of big injuries we've talked about regular times throughout this season so far and throughout the summer. The injuries are a key one, and our inability to recognise that and bring someone in earlier on has really killed us. Obviously, we had the Tchouaméni deal, or evidently that didn't happen. He went to Madrid, and then we didn't really react to that. There was nobody that we considered bringing in as an alternative. The midfield is obviously a big issue. You've got Naby Keita out, you've got Thiago coming back, which is huge news. Do you think anybody who played in that Napoli game, barring Thiago, deserves to start in that midfield against Wolves?
Other than what did start, you mean?
Yeah.
I love Fabinho. Absolutely love him. I don't know who that was yesterday that I watched on the pitch for Fabinho. He was that bad, mate. He just looked fucked. And like he did. He looked like he'd been on a 10k and has to go out again. Like you've just got back from a dead long shot and then your bird's like, oh, you forgot this. And you got to go back out for it. He just looked completely drained, mate. So it might sound mad, but I'd play Bajcetic next game and I'd start Thiago. Thiago might not be able to do the full 90. I'm not expecting that. But you can get ahead within an hour. You could do 60 minutes. And then if it hasn't worked out for Bajcetic, you can always bring Fabinho on for half an hour. Playing half an hour rather than 90 minutes isn't so bad. But the problem is you can't keep starting the same players who are still playing terrible. Like Milner's already started more games this season than I expected him to start the whole of the season. I honestly thought he'd just make substitute appearances in the odd cup game. He started nearly every game. He's 37. Like, that's madness. He was lucky to stay on the pitch yesterday, by the way. I couldn't believe that Klopp didn't rag him off at half time. He should have been sent off within 20 minutes of the game. He can't start. Whether you put Bajcetic in or not, Milner cannot start this weekend. He can't. And I'm not even blaming him for it a bit because managers complain when the players have to play 3 times a week when they're in the peak. 25, 26 young lads. We're talking about a 37-year-old playing 3 games a week. It doesn't matter how fit he is, he's still human. So, yeah, for me, mate, Milner cannot play. Not even just because of his performances, just because I think you're asking far too much of a 37-year-old to be playing 3 games a week and to try and challenge on all fronts with that. It's not good enough, mate. So, I'd shake the midfield up. I'd bring Bajcetic and Thiago in, albeit Thiago probably obviously won't play the full 90.
Yeah. Do you think there's a space, Jay, for Arthur to come in? Do you think we've signed him on loan? He didn't really get much time on the pitch and minutes, but there comes a point where you've just got to throw him in the deep end. Do you think this Wolves game coming up is the game for that?
It's definitely a better game than the one next week against Chelsea because it's going to be Potter's first home game at Chelsea against us. So I wouldn't be starting in that game because that really is the deep end. Chelsea away, new manager, feel good factor. So yeah, it probably is a good time to play him. Even to be honest, Elliot could probably do the rest. I know it sounds silly, but even when you've got a promise on upcoming kid, you don't play him every game. You've got to know when to take them out the squad and then to put them back in. And I think relying on a kid that young to be your only creative outlet, it's not fair. So yeah, maybe even after Bajcetic, Thiago, Milner can't play. And to be honest, I do think Elliot could probably do with a little break and come on for the last half hour. So yeah, it's a good shout. You know, that might be a good time to play Arthur with it being at home as well.
Yes, yeah, he's coming on loan. There's rumours that he's already agreed wages and structure of his deal should Liverpool trigger that option to buy at the end of the loan deal. He's only been here a few weeks and already wants to stay from the reports and rumours coming out. Drew, it's fair to say that midfield isn't the most athletic and isn't the youngest, with the exception of Harvey Elliott. Does there come a point where you have to look at that midfield and blame Klopp for that, or do you blame? Is it FSG for not backing him, or what? Whose fault does this midfield and the way we're playing, the way we've started this season? Where does the blame lie? I guess is the question I'm asking.
I'd say there's a bit of bad luck involved, but you have to put the majority of blame on Klopp and owners for not foreseeing this situation. It's not like we don't know most of our midfield is injury prone. Like we haven't had a fully fit midfield for the past 5 seasons. So Yeah, like relying on Thiago's never played a fully fit season, even when he was at Bayern. So, like, expecting him to put in 38 games, and last year, what we play upwards of mid 60s games, 63, something like that, to expect Thiago to be fit for every single one. And we're all crying out how different we are when he's in the team. So you can't build a team around a player who max has 23, 24 games a season. So I think that lack of foresight has to fall on the owners and Klopp's head for not bringing someone in. Bad luck that we didn't get Tchouaméni because that's a completely different story. But we should know. We should know by now that we need a midfield, and we should have acted on it. Arthur's. I hope to be incredibly surprised and wowed by his performance at Liverpool. But if he's just another kind of almost 9-to-5 midfielder, which I would describe the majority of our midfielders as just ones who can put in a shift. They don't do anything spectacular that no one else can do except for Fabinho and Thiago. But when you have world-class players in every other position except our midfield, aside from Thiago and Fabinho, this isn't a new problem, and it should have been addressed by now. I like to back our owners and clubs saying that we've spent and we've gotten players that we want and we've got the team here, but it's incredibly difficult to back them with lack of foresight on our midfield situation where it is right now. And it's to the point where we need a challenge. We need world-class players in the midfield, and we haven't even done anything about that in years, minus Thiago.
Yeah. There comes a point where someone's got to take responsibility for this. There's been a lot of hate recently and a lot of pressure placed on Jurgen Klopp. I don't think it's only his fault in this. There is certainly FSG have got to take at least some of the blame. Jay, if this does land all on Jurgen Klopp and FSG decide he's not good enough, we're going to part ways, which has been rumoured and been questioned about whether that's something that, if we continue down this road, that's something they could do in a few weeks' time. Do you think that's a fair reaction by FSG? And where do we go from Klopp is the big question I've got to ask.
Klopp gets sacked, mate. There'll literally be riots outside Anfield, believe me. I only live up the road and I'll probably be at the front of the line as well, to be honest. The thing about this, mate, with Klopp is FSG have got away with murder because we've got Klopp. He's done nothing but miracles, mate. I swear to God, no one else would win a Premier League, get to Champions League finals with Milner, Henderson and Wijnaldum as your three midfielders. That doesn't happen. You look at the team we had before he was here to what it is now. Jurgen Klopp's like the best thing about our club at the minute. I know results aren't going well, but if you can't support Liverpool through a bad run when we're getting beaten with crap, don't support us when we're in Champions League finals. Don't support us when we're winning the league either, because that's what being a footy fan is. When you're getting beat, you still watch. I see loads of comments when we're getting beat, like, I'm turning this off now. What do you mean? You crap. You're meant to be a proper fan. Watch the game. If you lose 4-1, you lose 4-1. Watch it till the end. It absolutely does me head in. No, mate, like I said, you sack Jurgen Klopp, Liverpool go back to being mediocre, because no other manager could do with the squad of players that he inherited what he's done. So no, I think that'd be suicide if FSG done that, to be honest.
Yeah, it certainly seems like an overreaction. It certainly seems like an overreaction from media and fans on social media as well. Drew, do you fall on the same lines as Jay? It feels like a fairly expected point and an expected route to go down. Sacking Jurgen Klopp is just purely, it's never going to happen at this stage, is it?
No, I don't think it would happen unless Klopp himself stepped down. I think we saw that at Dortmund, where he kind of realized it was just time for him to go. He couldn't fix the situation. He wasn't the man for the job, and that's the only way I see him stepping out of the Liverpool managerial position, as if he is the one who raises his hand and calls it quits or says he's not the right man anymore. I don't think the owners would sack him. If they do, I completely disagree with that decision. I think, as Jay said, he'd lead the riots outside Anfield, but from afar, I'd be rooting for him because that would be a massively boneheaded move to make. We kind of gave him like a free hit, or we kind of gave the entire team a free hit during the injury crisis of the COVID season. But I'm not saying we give this season a free hit, but it kind of does feel like a transition season with Nunez coming in, Diaz taking up a huge mantle. Our midfield should have been in the process of a greater transition at this point. But I think regardless of how this season goes, it's going to be next season that is our biggest summer in recent history, because that's when we need the biggest changes. I think this season we shouldn't take anything less. We should be challenging on all fronts, but Klopp signed the extra deal, and it looks in mind like he's creating the next team, and we're in the process of that. So there's bound to be some bumps in the road. We should have foreseen a lot of these bumps, but you don't sack the man who's got us to where we are from, the Roy Hodgson eras. Brendan Rodgers was the stopgap, but he couldn't bring us the ultimate destination, and Rodgers' tenure was mainly highlighted by Luis Suarez, the freak of nature who Holland is eerily reminding me of. But Klopp took the reins from there, and he's got us to where we are today. You back him unless he steps down himself.
Yeah. It seems almost insulting at this point for anybody to suggest that Jurgen Klopp could be on his way out after a disappointing start to the season. That defeat against Napoli just highlighted how poor we've been so far. The non-existent midfield, mistakes throughout the team. Tactically, we look off. We look very poor. You'd expect at this point Jurgen Klopp to try something different. He's talked in the press after the game about reinventing the side. How do you see Jurgen Klopp approaching the short term? The Wolves game and the Chelsea game, do you expect a change in formation? Do you expect maybe us to drop back the high line? That's been talked about a lot. Do you expect any tactical changes coming up?
I don't, to be honest, mate. No, I just think he's going to tell them to put the effort in, that they need to put the effort in for, that we expect, and what they've done throughout his tenure at us. He's not going to drop the high line. It's worked for us the whole of last season. And we're 7-8 games into this season, yet it's not working. But for the whole of last season, it did. So he's not going to change his whole tactical philosophy based on a bad run. Bear in mind, don't get me wrong, we were awful yesterday, really bad. And we were against United as well, really, really bad. But we have had injuries. And you seen yesterday, as soon as Thiago and Matty come on, it was a different game. Not like we were great, we weren't. But we were a much better side once Matty and Thiago came in. So the bad thing is, obviously, you can't rely on Thiago staying fit. When he's in the team, I have no doubts that we'll win the game. He's that good. He can change games that good. But I think that's why everyone's like hating on Trent now. When Thiago's not in the team, our only creative outlet is Trent. So we just give him the ball constantly. And because he's trying to be the creative outlet, he gets caught defensively constantly. When Thiago's on the pitch, it's not just on Trent to be the creative outlet, it's on Thiago as well. And it frees up more space for Trent then. So having him in the side is a massive difference, mate. So with him back, I think we can pick up at least 4 points out the next 2 games. And he probably just thinks, when I get to the international break, come back, go again, start fresh, with everyone fit, hopefully. Matip obviously doesn't do international, so good week of training for him. And then Thiago will get a bit of match fitness playing for Spain and that. So I never won international breaks, but this is the first time I've actually been thankful for one. So I think getting Thiago, Matip and a few of the others back, we should be able to pick up points against Wolves and Chelsea, and then it's just about getting to the international break and hoping everyone's fit when we get back.
Yeah. I think I'm very much like you. I think the first time I've actually wanted an international break to come sooner than it has been. Thiago is certainly an unbelievable player, and even in the short period of time on the pitch, he really showed us what we were missing. I think I saw a stat whilst prepping for this stream that he made the most tackles in the whole game against Napoli, which is
crazy, isn't it?
Beyond crazy considering the amount of time he was on the pitch for. Drew, we've talked about Thiago a lot in the past about how good he is and his injury problems, and that he's always getting little niggles. In his last 7 seasons of league football here at Liverpool and at Bayern Munich, he's played on average 25 games a season in the league. We've talked about him being a luxury player and maybe using him sparingly. Can Liverpool afford at this moment in time to use him sparingly and use him as that luxury player and rotate and make changes even when he is fit, just to make sure he doesn't pick up those little niggly injuries?
Yeah, you're going to have to, especially when you're relying on him to be the operator in our midfield. When we play as poorly as we do without him, we can't afford to have him miss the entire season through some injury, and we can't have him picking up, 2-month injuries after just a few games of playing. So yeah, he's our major creative outlet in the midfielder, and we're basically relying on him to operate the midfield. We have to tailor some sort of game plan around keeping him fit. And we should be able to do that. We did that with Matip. I couldn't believe he got an entire season last year pretty much unscathed through injury. And if we can do that with someone like Matip, we should be able to do it with Thiago. And I think the fact that we are relying on him so heavily, and we've missed him as immensely as we have these past few games, shows that we need to create a plan around how to keep him fit. It's as simple as that. We've seen games like Bournemouth where we absolutely, wreck a side without him. So we got to pick those games where we can potentially give him rest and then utilize him in the games where we absolutely need him, or find a minutes, capacity where we shouldn't push him past that threshold. We should figure out a way to do it, because as of this moment, our midfield is dire, and he's, aside from Elliott, as Jay said a while back, you can't keep relying or putting that burden of an entire midfield creatively on a 19-year-old shoulder. So figure out how to get it done to keep Thiago fit for the entire season until we get more reinforcements. Yeah,
it's certainly a tough ask to do. He's picked up a lot of injuries, even in his short time at Liverpool in the 2 years or so he's been here. Jay, it's come to the point where we have to, it feels at this moment in time, we have to bring in players in January, don't we? Like the option, we've talked about this being a transition season. Do we forget January, plan for the summer, and write off this season in general and just concentrate on the league and focus on getting top 4? Or do we make changes in January, which is not something we've done often, and say, no, we're not writing off the season. We will start planning for the summer, but we need the players in now, given the injury history of some of our midfield and how disappointing we started the season.
I think the only type of player you're going to get in January are the type of players that we were linked with but didn't get. So like Tielemans, Ruben Neves, you're not going to get a Bellingham or a Barella or, a Marquis start in January. It's not going to happen, but I think we should get a player who can do a job up until the season after, even if that is a Tielemans for You only have 6 months on his deal then, so it'd be like a £15 million signing. It's a no-brainer for me. Just for the reliability alone. So what you've got to remember is if we don't strengthen in January and Thiago's fifth and we're flying, if he gets injured after that, there's a very good chance we do that again and sink again. I don't like to say like a transition season because it's a bit of a joke to say it because we've only really lost one player and challenged for everything last season, but I can't tell you how important I think it is that we just make sure we finish fourth this season because we've got 3 midfielders leaving next season. It's going to be a massive winter. Whether FSG want to or not, they have to replace them players. Have to. Keita's gone. Ox is gone. Milner's got to be gone by then, surely. That's 3 midfielders that you need. We don't even know what will happen with Curtis Jones because if he doesn't get a proper run, I can imagine he's going to want to go and play somewhere. So you're talking at least 3 midfielders. And the 3 midfielders who need to come straight into your team. If we don't get top 4, who's going to want to go? Where FSG don't spend when we're challenging for Premier Leagues and Champions Leagues. Imagine not getting in the top 4 and you're expecting them to bring in 3 midfielders that can come straight into your side. It's a massive season, mate, in terms of, don't get me wrong, it's early to be worrying now, but Champions League just has to be priority, mate, because if we don't get that this season, with all the players that are going to be leaving next season, we're in a very, very, very dangerous place.
We certainly are. We certainly are. It's going to be a big change up in the summer, as you've mentioned. A lot of players leaving. Naby Keita, one of the main ones, who seemingly wants his way out. He's not happy with the game time. Something that has surprised me quite recently is being called up to the Guinea national squad for the internationals, despite, according to Liverpool, being injured. Drew, is that Guinea calling him up to just assess him, just to get him away from Liverpool? If he does want out, he can go go wherever he wants. He can enjoy his time on the international break, not play a whole bunch of games, but just focus on him rather than being in Liverpool, which is evidently something he wants out of. Or is that him faking an injury at Liverpool, or maybe refusing to play? What can you think of any logical reason why Guinea would call him up, despite the fact he is meant to be currently injured?
The only kind way I could view it would be as if he'd be available for like one of their later games. They're like, oh, he'll miss the first game, but he'll play the second one of the window or whatever, that being the case, or could have a role in that kind of thing. Any of the other explanations you said, like if he just wanted to get away from the club, that's not something he should have to ask for international team to do for him. He should be able to talk with the club and say, hey, I need a vacation. And I assume that Klopp and the club would be more than happy to give him some time off if that's what he really needed. But any other explanation, then he would be available for a later game in some capacity is unacceptable given what we know from the news of him being injured for the club. Because if it's in that situation where he's faking injury or doesn't want to play for the club, we should have got rid of him, or we should terminate his contract if that's the case. If it's playing it this early, I don't care about money recouping at this point. If you have a player at that point, it's not good to have him around the team.
No, it's clear to see something's going on with Naby Keita. As much as he struggled for injuries in his time at Liverpool so far, last season he didn't miss a whole bunch of games because of injuries. His stats last season went overly bad. They weren't great, but they weren't overly bad in comparison to other seasons. Is Liverpool claiming he's injured? Is this Jurgen Klopp essentially dusting his hands and going, no, I don't want him. If he wants to leave, he's not going to play for the rest of the season. Not including him in the Champions League squad was a huge statement. Even if he is injured, and now he's being called up. Jay, is this Jürgen dusting his hands of Naby Keita and saying, "Yep, that's it. You're going at the end of the contract. If you want to leave, you can sit on the bench for the rest of the season and not do anything"? Or is there another ulterior motive that you can think behind all of this Naby Keita situation?
No, it is a weird one, because obviously if you're not picked for the Champions League group stage, that means you're injured for the duration of it. It lasts for, when's the Champions League end for the second phase? Is it November?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so that means he's ruled out till at least then, if you've left him out. With Guinea playing a week and he's been called up. If that doesn't tell you everything about that situation, I don't know what does. It's quite clear what's happened there. There's obviously been a fallout. Klopp doesn't want him. Why we didn't sell him, I don't know. Because we're going to lose him now and we're just going to pay his contract for another 12 months and he's probably not going to play at all. Something has to have happened there, mate, because like I say, if you're not putting someone in the Champions League squad because they're injured, that's fine if it's a long-term injury. If it's not a long-term injury, you still put them in. They might not play the first 2 games, but they play the last 4 or the last 3, whatever way it works out. If Guinea have picked him, they're picking him to play. He's not there for moral support. He can go on his own whim for moral support, just take his own flight there. So, obviously, if he plays the first game for Guinea, it'll pretty much say everything about the situation. Klopp just doesn't like him anymore. He fell out and he probably won't play for us again. But yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it looks like, isn't it? Let's be honest. He's been called up to play in a week but can't play in the next 4 months for Liverpool. So yeah. I think that says everything. But then I think we're foolish for not just getting rid when we cut off.
Yeah, it's a very odd situation and circumstance to be in. Of recent memory, I can't remember anybody too similar, barring Coutinho for a certain period of time when he wanted to force his way out, but that was blatantly obvious.
Know what, Tino? It's one of them as well, though, mate. Like, he's probably happy to run his contract down. Who's going to pay money for Keita now? He's injured all the time. Players now, it's in their interest to run the contract down because you got to sign an on fee. So even if for a year you don't play, most players now are like, I'm not asked, I'll get 10 million for signing for whoever. Whereas if they leave on a contract, they don't get that signing on fee. So that's probably the only reason we haven't sold them.
Maybe that's a very interesting point. The final play I do want to discuss with regards to the midfield is someone we've touched on very briefly, and it's Harvey Elliott. We've mentioned about playing him in the right games, Drew, and looking at not overloading him because we heavily relying on a 19-year-old who admittedly has been phenomenal when he played. He has been brilliant. Obviously, the game against Napoli, he played all right. He was probably for me, he was probably one of the better players on the pitch, but that didn't take a lot of doing because 99% of those players on the pitch were absolutely goddamn awful. Harvey Elliott is a very creative outlet and a creative option. A comment quite a while back that I flagged from Adam talks about how Harvey Elliott interacts with Salah and is putting Salah off potentially. Do you agree with that comment from Adam? Do you think Harvey Elliott being in that right-hand side in that team is maybe pushing Salah a bit wider, meaning he's not getting those goals? And do you think that's the reason for Salah's possible poor start? Do you think Harvey Elliott maybe deserves a rest? How do you view that situation and that interaction, Drew?
It's hard to gauge when so much is going wrong. It's not like it's just Salah who's underperforming. You could even argue like Diaz's brilliant performances, brilliant goals have been like individual efforts, where he's jinxed through a bunch of the defense or he's just cut in and whipped a worldie into the far corner. It's not from like intricate link-up play. It's purely like a wonder moment from a brilliant player. So tactically, I don't know if we can see that at this moment in time. Like the team's just poorly playing throughout midfield, attack, defense. So I don't know if you could accurately make a claim of if Elliott is affecting Salah negatively, because the entire team is playing poorly. I don't think it's like one tweak there that ultimately fixes the entire puzzle. Also know that Salah himself said he's been asked to do a different role this season with Nunez coming in. Like I think Klopp wanted to work in Nunez. Had probably had that working in preseason to have Salah be more of a provider, which is something that he said. And then Nunez goes and gets a red card. So you kind of like, it's like, oh great, now like do we go back to or back what we did last season? It's just a mess right now. So I think early analysis on something like that, we don't have all the right numbers in front of us to make that kind of call at this moment. But one thing's for certain is that the team isn't clicking.
Yeah, the team certainly is not clicking. Salah moving out wide has been and pushing wider. For me, it's to a certain extent delusional when Darwin Nunez isn't on the pitch. If Darwin Nunez is on the pitch, I completely understand Salah pushing out wide, playing more that creative, that provider role, especially when you've got someone of his build, someone the way and tactically he's played for Benfica. It makes total sense. It makes total sense, Jay. But when he's not on the pitch, the red card, he's still staying out wide. Do you think that's just him trying to get used to his new role within the squad? Or do you think maybe it's just a combination of he's played a lot of games over the last 4 or 5 years or however long it's been. He's been the main provider and done unbelievably. Are we putting too much pressure on Salah to perform to the ridiculously high standards that he's been consistently performing to whilst being at Liverpool Football Club?
No, I think to do make a good point. The teams that offer at the minute everywhere that you can't put your finger on one particular player. The whole team isn't playing well, but one thing I think definitely doesn't help is playing Firmino, then Nunez, then Firmino, then Nunez. The reason being, Firmino's a false nine and plays false nine. Then Nunez starts and doesn't play false nine, he plays centre forwards. The whole team has to adjust to that. It might sound like a little change to some people, it's not. It's a big tactical change doing that. So I think actually the Nunez red card sort of plays a part in it, because obviously Nunez isn't going to play as a false nine, Firmino does. So then when you're chopping and changing the two of them, you're not just changing the personnel, you're making a tactical tweak as well. And sometimes I've got to be honest, I think Salah's too narrow. He gets narrow all the time, and one of the problems we've had I found is when Nunez plays, we don't cross it. When he's not playing, we cross it. Like, one of the things that was frustrating me the most at Napoli is we'll cross the ball when there's no one in the box. For what purpose? Like, you cross it and there's no one actually in there. So, yeah, I think swapping Firmino and Nunez all the time doesn't help, because obviously you are changing tactically as well as personnel. So it's one of them, mate. We just need to, even if it's not going well, maybe just stick with something so we can get a bit of fluency and momentum going.
Yeah, momentum is a really key point. It's been a very disjointed season so far. You mentioned about chopping and changing from players and how that impacts rotation. Drew was a big key to the reason why we got to the Champions League final, second in the league, won 2 domestic cups last season. Rotation was the key aspect, but it wasn't really in the forward line too much. It was mainly in the midfield, and chopping and changing the forward line every other game doesn't really help. What would you do for the Wolves game and the Chelsea game coming up? Would you stick with Darwin Nunez? He's found it sort of tough at times since he's come in and got bullied again at times, being petulant in the game against Palace where he got sent off. Would you stick with him, or would you go back to what Liverpool are used to in the false nine with Roberto Firmino? Obviously, Diogo Jota's back and fit and ready now. How would you line up for the Wolves game? And would you stick with that going forward just to get a bit of momentum?
I think Klopp's going to start with Nunez. I think what Jay said around the chopping and changing, starting Firmino one game, Nunez the next. He's right, and that has to go. We have to start with whatever's going to be the future front line and get that established, settled in, get everyone used to playing with that, because then the midfield can adapt to how they need to perform and who they need to find going forward. That needs to be the case going, from this game on. Honestly, I'm not a pessimistic person, but I do have my doubts over Nunez's capabilities this season. He's shown very poor first touch, very poor close link-up play. I hope he just gets on fine goal scoring form and just gets his confidence super high, because he doesn't look very confident either on the ball. That being said, I still think he will start. I'd argue, though, maybe this is Jota's chance to come into the team and really just take the spot and be like, hey, I know I wasn't in anyone's plans, but I can do the job, and I'm the best man at this position right now. Because I think that's honestly, he's the only one who shows confidence in that position. I don't think Nunez has shown the confidence. I don't think Firmino has shown confidence in the past year or two in terms of goal scoring ability. Jota, I immediately loved him when he was on Wolves, when I started watching him doing it flying in the Europa League. And for me, my personal moment with him was when he was on Portugal and he completely ignored Ronaldo to take on a shot, and Ronaldo flipped out at him and he didn't even look at him. He was like, whatever. I think if you can stand up to Ronaldo and take shots, you have the confidence to play in the front line. And honestly, at the end of the day, if you want to be a world-class player, you have to be confident. You have to have that little bit of selfishness saying that I don't care if I miss a goal, it's not going to affect me. I'm just going to score the next one. And Jota is the only one who really has shown that out of the three of Firmino, Nunez, and him at this point. I really do hope Nunez works out, and I do think Klopp will start him, and that needs to be the personnel moving forward. But I'm curious if Jota just doesn't nip in there with a substitute appearance if Nunez doesn't work out in the first 60, Jota gets a goal and says, hey, Klopp, put me in next game.
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum to have, and it's quite nice that we're getting back into having that conundrum of having a few different options up front. Losing Divock Origi, losing Minamino, as much as they didn't play a lot, they were very influential at big points in the domestic cups. And Divock Origi is really a cult figure. Jay, do you think we've made a mistake not replacing both of those two players? And only bringing in Darwin Nunez as a forward option. He hasn't evidently started as well as he could have done, albeit his substitute appearances at the start of the season in the Community Shield, he looked phenomenal. Do you think we should have brought in another body?
Which two players? Sorry, I know you said Mana. You was the other one that you meant.
Minamino or
Minamino. Yeah. I don't know, beginning of the season I was saying no, because I looked at our bench last year and you had Firmino, Diaz or Jota, Firmino. So, it was like, if you brought someone else on top of Nunez, well, yeah, let's say if Nunez started the way Ireland did, would you think we needed a striker? Probably not. He obviously hasn't started like that. I've got to be brutally honest, and I know loads of people are like, oh, he's young, he's only played 5 games. I don't think he's a Liverpool player at all in any way. I said beginning of the season, I don't think we should go for Nunez because he hasn't got a great first touch. His link-up play isn't great. I'm not saying he's not a good player and won't score goals, but you need to build your team around him and make him the target man. That's why he was so effective against us for Benfica, because he was their outlet. They build around him. That's never going to happen at Liverpool. We're never going to build our team around him ever. So I hope I'm wrong, and all of a sudden he develops a world-class touch, but he certainly hasn't got one now. Even everyone was talking about that Bachio goal that got deflected. It was a deflected goal. Then the other night, someone's talking about how we rattled the bar. That got a deflection. Like, I know these are things where it sounds like I'm being petty and nitpicky, but the fact when he hit that bar the other day, it come off another player's chest before it hit the bar, so it looks like a world-class strike, but it's not. It's fortunate. Same as the Bachio goal, it was fortunate. Class piece of skill and improvisation, of course, but it is a player and went in, so it's sort of fluky. Do you know what I mean? Look, I hope I'm proved wrong when I'm saying stuff like this. I don't want the kid to fail, but I just do not see a Liverpool player in Nunez. I really, really don't. For me, he's an out and outside man with pace, and we don't play that way. So hopefully I'm wrong, mate, but I just don't see Nunez working with us. I really don't. And I know it's early days and that sounds mad, but it's just how I feel.
Yeah, and it's a key point to hit on, Drew. He doesn't seem like a Liverpool player in the stylistically and tactically in the way we're used to. When he was brought in, I know I was one of these people who talked about how he allowed us to change up the way we play, change up tactically, maybe move into that 4-2-3-1 formation that has been bandied about since Jurgen Klopp came into Liverpool. It's a formation that he apparently loves. And loves to play at Dortmund. Do you agree with Jay's sentiment, or with regards to Darwin Nunez, or are you more on the he'll come good eventually? We'll transition into a style that'll suit him, and then this will all be just a forgotten couple of months in his Liverpool career?
As I said, I don't think he's got a first touch. I echoed some of Jay's statements, although Jay made a proclamation that at this moment in time, I do agree with. Again, same sort of sentiments. I hope he proves me wrong, but the biggest thing for me is the confidence. Like, you don't get a red card against Crystal Palace because you're frustrated. A headbutt, that's absolutely daft. It's not like he's Harvey Elliott. He's been in the game. He's played for Benfica. He's been in the Champions League. You shouldn't be getting a red card for that. The fact that Anderson, Crystal Palace center back, got under your skin when you're just betting into the team, that it's very panicky from him. He looks very. I think he gave an interview too, where he was saying that his first few weeks he was extremely nervous. His touch was poor. He couldn't make like a 2-yard pass. It's like I don't swear, but holy shit! Like, how are you coming into a team and like that's where you're at? Like, I feel for him. Like, I really do hope he does well. I think he needs all the support. He doesn't need any criticism or stuff like that. But just speaking on the facts that are there right now, it's like, look at Haaland when he got all those memes from missing in the Community Shield. He goes on, he's like the highest scoring Premier League striker in 6 matches or whatever it is. It's unbelievable. I don't think he posted an Instagram post saying that he needs to pick it up or anything. He just did the business on the pitch. I think the mentality's like Nunez, for me, I think it's unfortunate because we're looking for him to be this ultimate goal scorer, to come into the team and score goals. He's replacing Mane, essentially. I know Diaz is in that role, but he was brought into the team to score goals. And, Jota was injured, couldn't help with that burden. And Nunez was basically thrown into the deep end right away. And you need to swim. Like, you absolutely need to swim to succeed. You're not going to get the time to bed into the team when you're absolutely needed on the pitch. That's where I think it could go against him. I think if he had a fully fit squad, I think Klopp would have ideally liked to ease him in, build up his confidence. It's different when you come into a side that's fully flying and you're able to just seamlessly fit in and show what you have. It's a completely different situation when you're going in expected to perform, and you need to have the confidence, the experience to handle that pressure and do the job. If Nunez doesn't have a good first year at the club, it's not like we can rely on him or back him for another season. We're going to have to get somebody who challenges. Like, that's where I see if he doesn't perform this year, that's when we go and then buy like Tony from Brentford. Yeah, Ivan Tony. That's what you need to do. You're not going to have longer than this season to bet in. So I really do hope he does, but as Jay said before, we're not changing our team around a striker who isn't firing. You have to demand that. We had Origi. There was maybe a moment where Klopp, pre-Everton injury, where Origi looked like he could play a serious role in the squad, and maybe we could have shaped it around that. But unless you're putting in that kind of form, there is absolutely no reason to change a system to fit a player who hasn't hit the ground running.
No, that's certainly true, and that is where we'll end it today. Make sure you leave a like on the stream if you've enjoyed it. Of course, subscribe as well to the LFC Transfer Room and follow us on social media. I'm Tino. I've been joined by Jay and Drew on this LFC Transfer Room stream. So enjoy the night, and we will catch you again tomorrow.